We enter into this study in order to draw close to you for the sake of holy service and the fulfillment of your will for us and for all of Israel and for this entire planet. Please assist our efforts and guide our understandings. Let us internalize your Torah to the depth of our being so that we become transformed by your will and its truths. Let neither ourselves nor anyone else come into stumbling as a result of this study. Galeinai ve'avota niflot mitoratecha. We're going to dedicate, say the blessing, and then I'll tell you what we're going to do after that. Obviously, I am dedicating today's study to grace, asking grace, an arm of the Holy Blessed One, to touch the hearts and minds of those whose pain is so great that they think the only choice they have is to hurt another person. Holy Blessed One, please help touch these pained souls so that they can get the support they need to lift them up. Where else would you like dedication today, my friends? Please, let's name it. Anywhere? Anyone? Please, Rachel.
Yeah, to all those who still struggle with this virus, especially those who have to struggle alone.
Can you hear it, son? I'd like to offer to the 10 lives that were lost here in Boulder. There are connections, the connections rolled in of who know who. Boulder is small enough that everybody is connected with somebody who lost somebody. Diana? We can't hear you, my love, although I see your mouth moving. If you can't figure it out, you can always put it in the chat. Yeah, can't hear you, hon. So go ahead and write it in the chat so we can have it there. And anybody else who wants to write in the chat where we dedicate today's study. I also dedicate it to the hearts of everybody who's gathering here or who will listen to this. May you find your own tight, narrow places and find a way to lift that up. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. So today is Shabbat Hagadol. And, thank you so much. Thank you, Eugene. May both Carol and her aunt find respite and strength in this journey. Also to my friend Carol's mother, Rita, who just died in this last week, who has yet to be interned. May her soul have ease in this process before she's finally buried next week. So it's Shabbat Hagadol, the big Shabbat. It's the Shabbat before Pesach. And one of the things that makes this the big Shabbat is that back in the day, rabbis would only give sermons 2 times a year. Yom Kippur, and this one just before Pesach. Well, this is the first Pesach that I am a rabbi. So I'm going to give a big sermon. I'm starting this out. Aaron, it's so good to see you, by the way. So good to see you. I'm going to give a big sermon here. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about this Parsha, and I'm going to talk about the underlying structure and architecture of the korbanot, these offerings based upon the teachings of Rabbi Isaac Luria. I've got here, 4 pages. It's going to take me at least 10 minutes to speak to this, and I'm not going to take questions in between. I want to ask you, if something comes up that you want to discuss, if you write on Shabbat, scribble a note of it. If you don't write on Shabbat, remember it. This is a part of our ancient tradition, is to remember through listening. And I will begin. Good Shabbos, dear friends. As the Sabbath bride lands among us, take a moment and just look at all of the beautiful faces here. Each and every one of you is one of the apples of the orchard of God's delight. Today we gather on Shabbat Hagadol, the great Shabbat before Passover. Passover or Pesach marks the end of several generations of slavery, a time when Bnei Yisrael is said to have descended to the 49th gate of impurity, one step away from dissolving altogether. The sages say that at this point in time, speech was in exile, and that the men in particular had become so despondent and desensitized that they couldn't even articulate what was wrong. What brought about redemption? What was it that activated Hashem to remember God's promise to Abraham made hundreds of years before? What was the arousal from below that brought God out of inertia? It seems that it was the expression of emotions. It was our sighs, our moans, our groans, our cries. It was the ability to feel from the depths, from the kishkis, and then to be able to express that feeling. Even as speech was in exile, the raw feelings still existed. This week, our parsha of the week is Tzav, which means command. It is part of the story of the priests and occurs just before Aaron and his sons have their initiation. The Kohanes, the priests, are the archetypes of divine service, symbolic of who we are growing into. And I'm just going to ask you, I'm checking if you are not muted. It's important to stay muted. Thank you. The ones, these are the ones who could create the vertical and horizontal channel of divine expression into the world. Creating a connection above and below, a channel, becoming a hollow bone and bringing the flow down, and also becoming the horizontal line, which is about creating a connection amongst all people, about enhancing community. My friends, this is our spiritual inheritance according to Exodus chapter 19, verse 6, where we're all to become a nation of priests and priestesses. Tzav speaks about the korbanot, often translated as sacrifice, yet really meaning to draw close. The korbanot have various functions. They include peace offerings, offerings for well-being, for one who has guilt, for one has sinned or missed the mark. I want to take a moment and focus on the olah offering, the burnt offering, which literally means olah, to raise up, like when you make an aliyah to the Torah or make an aliyah to Israel. Of this, the Torah says we are to offer an olah 2 times a day, and that the fire shall be kept burning on the altar continuously. It shall not go out. A Hasidic read of this suggests that this fire is connected to our inner fire, a fire that burns within us, that is connected to the part of our soul that is filled with godly love, wisdom, and passion. This is a fire that we can cultivate, tend to, add wood to, so that it can burn bright. This can be our arousal from below, where the fire rises, evoking a response of divine love, love that can rain down and be spread out. One of the ways to tend this fire is to stay connected to our feelings. In these times that are so uncertain, we might feel overwhelmed and out of control, and it is easy to lose touch with some of the difficult emotions that come up. Torah teaches us that we have to know what we want to offer in order to move closer. We have to understand what feelings are at stake of turning dark or being suppressed. We have to know which korban to offer. And in order to do that, we have to understand what is going on within. Rabbi Isaac Lurie of blessed memory offers a map of understanding on the highest, most vibrational level of what these korbanot are really about. My friends, I would like to offer to you my understanding of his understanding. I think you will appreciate this as you hear it. I think you will have a new perspective. Let's see what we can accomplish. As I said, I've never thought this before or written this before or said this before. So thank you for being my holy chevra to be able to give this a try. Let's see what happens. The Arizal explained, the procedure of the olah and collecting of the ashes in the linen tunic is about the process of purifying the root of the emotional body, which lies above the intellect in its origin. Our instinctual emotions are of the level of Adam. Development of conscious emotions and purification of intellect are at the level of Ish, Isha, Ishe. We are all born Adam. We are all born with a nefesh. We all have the capacity to tend the inner fires of God's presence within our own bodies and raise up that fire to become the Ish, Isha, Isha that we can possibly become. Right use of fire and development of the soul. A sacrifice consists of an upward and downward movement. This is a spiritual movement. This construction of energy that the priest establishes is a key function of the priesthood. Elevating human animal nature into holiness is the essence of the purification ritual. As the animal ascends in flames on the altar, as life is taken and the human ponders the preciousness of life, and awareness occurs. This humbling moment allows for one to see how their own animal nature limits the possibility of purifying our basic instincts and raising it toward a connection with the Holy Creator. This realization of Yirat Hashem, awe of God, awakens Ahavat Hashem, love of God. Love of God awakens the remembrance that in each and every soul upon this planet, that God's spark dwells within them. And when we love God, we love the other. Again, I'm just keep muted, my friends. This arousal, this upward motion of an offering, this arousal brings forth the downward flow of blessings. These two motions, along with discerning the proper korban and making an offering, gevurah, and receiving the beneficence, chesed, is an essential part of establishing the vertical channel. Apples from the Orchard puts it thusly: the downward flow of God's beneficence into the world expresses God's love, while the ecstatic upward giving of the soul, when you, from that upward offering from Gevurah, expresses the ardent power of human love and yearning for God, expressed in the song accompanying the sacrifice. Please remember, in the temple culture, not only would these have been going on of the actual sacrifices, but the Levites would have been all around singing songs, and the women just outside of the tent of meeting would have been in their prayers also offering a stabilization of energy. This would have been a whole energetic situation, community within community within community, creating offerings, the people bringing the wood, their hearts, everybody having a role in this communal purification. Emotions and intellect are two different things with two different roots in the source of consciousness. The cold and objective intellect may provide the emotions with inspiration and content, but it does not produce the emotions. Apples of the Orchard says, the greater the intellectual understanding of a given concept, the greater and more intense the emotional response to it. So you might say, what is the source of the emotions? The Arizal teaches that in the superconscious parts of the soul, the superconscious parts of our psyche, emotions come from a higher source than intellect and is a part of our purer self, a self that exists pre-ego. The emotions that have their root above Abba and Ima, Chokhmah and Bina, they are more real than what our intellect produces, as they are closer to source. This jives with Edward Bach's work from the Bach flower remedy fame, who says that all disease begins in the emotional field. Learning to recognize this higher root. To get there, this is the secret of purification. We purify the intellect and the lower conscious and emotional, the conscious, emotional, and the instinctual worlds. Because in the process of becoming conscious, the emotions suffer a fall and become tainted by the ego. Let me explain this again. The emotions exist at a higher level connected to source, but as they come down, they come through the intellect, which is where our ego is born, and get tainted there. And then they manifest in our conscious emotion or our instinctual emotion, depending on how much inner work we have done. This is like doing shadow work, where in the back of our head is our potential of becoming our B'Tselem Elohim nature. And then something happens, it gets provoked, irritated by a dream or an event or work you're doing, journaling, whatever it is, and it's going to have to come through the ego, where it has to deal with all the static of our belief systems, including our limiting core beliefs, as it comes out into a pure offering. Our ancients did this work through sacrifices. We do this work in other ways. More about that in a moment. The shadow work we do pulls from this back of the head, unconscious material, processes it through the ego, the intellectualized part of our psyche that can distort and pollute the original core emotion. The emotions and our ability to feel and express them become the true measure of our personality. The work we do here, this is the process of the Musar work that is done during the counting of the Omer. These 6 sfirot that comprise Zer Anpin, if you don't understand that language, don't worry about it right now. But when we look at Chesed, Gevura, Teferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, those 6, which we deal with 6 out of the 7 weeks of the counting of the Omer, is the realm of Yetzirah, the emotional world. This is the work we do to develop our conscious emotions. We begin this work on the 2nd night of Passover. So you will sometime during that night, we begin that. And then we will work every week, do inner work, and try to purify these conscious emotions. When one learns to purify and access the higher root of the emotional world, one can begin to learn the secrets of the 13 attributes, the 13 expressions of divine love revealed to Moses after the golden calf. And you can learn the secrets of these 13 attributes and how they express through the hairs of the beard. This capacity to bring these lights down that the priests really activated during Yom Kippur were about accessing the true source of love and expression of God's beneficence towards us. The Arizal articulates how the linen clothes the priest, how the linen clothes that the priest would wear to collect the ashes are necessary to do the work in finding the root of these emotions in the supernal realm. According to the Arizal, only the high priest could truly rise to this level. That was the limitation, I believe, of his sociological time. We all have this capacity, but it's not given. We work on it. This all brings us, and we're coming in for a landing. This all brings us to the role of good and evil as expressed through the archetypes of Abraham and Esau. Apples of the Orchard says, almost all aspects of the created order have corresponding entities in the realm of evil. As it is written in Ecclesiastes, you have made one opposite the other. This is in order to afford humans the possibility of free choice. The creation of evil is so that we can have free will. Back to Apples of the Orchard. Nevertheless, the choice is weighted in favor of good and holiness, whereas Abraham personified the divine attribute of chesed, Isaac personified gevurah. Esav personified the fallen, evil aspect of gevurah. He is therefore associated with the color of gevurah, red. And listen carefully to what I'm about to say. On the side of evil, intellect is always subservient to emotions. That is, it serves simply as a way to justify and rationalize the emotions. And it exists to devise plans to satisfy the emotions rather than as a way to direct or influence the emotions. Things get turned inside out. The symbolism of the ritual of eternal burning, cultivating the fire passion, with careful attention to the ashes, the parts of our personality that cannot be fully burned and offered to God, has to be collected while we wear linen, cloth that is not connected to an animal at all, to distinguish our capacity to rise above the instinctual, to find the expression of our conscious emotions, which are rooted above the intellect. This is from where God's light can be accessed. This allows us to love truly and unconditionally, an expression of capacity to love in God's image. I know that was an earful, my friends. I'd like to take a little bit of time this morning to go into the specifics of the different korbanot. But I want us to understand that when they're talking about a purification ritual, and all the anthropologists stress that this was a purification cult of the temple period, what we're really trying to do is personalize. We're trying to be able to access that highest level that gets us most connected to loving through the intellect, which then informs the lower emotions. And what we're doing with these korbanot is then raising that up to try and establish that hollow bone. That's deep. So I would love to hear any questions comments, insights, pushbacks at this particular time. And I think I'm going to stop the recording here.